Cuba hosts the third cycle of peace dialogues between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army. In Spain, Colombian President Gustavo Petro arrived in Madrid on an official visit to reaffirm bilateral relations and sign agreements. And in Sudan, the Foreign Ministry announced a 7-day truce between the National Army and the Rapid Support Forces, raising hopes of an end to weeks of bloodshed. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. From Tuesday on, Cuba hosts the third cycle of peace dialogues between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army. These negotiations, stalled for 4 years, resumed on November 2022 in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, and were subsequently held in Mexico. According to the General Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the island, Eugenio Martinez, there are guarantees for the development of these talks in Havana. On April 25th, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez announced the date on which the Caribbean nation hosted this meeting and affirmed that his country would act with the traditional disposition and impartiality that characterizes it as a guarantor and alternative venue. In this context, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez Barrilla, stressed that for his nation to be a guarantor in this dialogue process is a high responsibility to provide solidarity to a nation that deserves peace, and recalled that Fidel Castro was a faithful defender and promoter of peace in Colombia.
For Cuba to be guarantor and alternative venue is a high responsibility that we will fulfill according to our experience, and we will do everything within our reach. We will act in solidarity with the people of Colombia, who so much deserve peace and justice. We will adhere to our guidelines of discretion, impartiality, and absolute respect for the will of the parties and the commitments assumed. We remember today the words of our commander Fidel Castro Ruz, fervent defender and promoter of peace in Colombia. And I quote, as Latin Americans, what we have to do is try to collaborate with Colombia, with the country, help the country to reach a just peace, a peace that benefits everyone.
For his part, the head of the ELN delegation stressed their full willingness and commitment to reach a ceasefire, and that both parties maintain the will to achieve and respect the agreements in this third round of peace talks.
We are fully willing and committed to achieving what we proposed in the Mexico cycle to reach a ceasefire and the participation of society. This is a legacy of 30 years of proposals when we proposed a national convention that would lead to a great national agreement. We hope that in this cycle both parties understand each other, respect each other, and maintain the political will to comply with the agreements and commitments. This contributes to trust, mutual credibility, and the legitimacy of this round of talks.
Addressing the country's presence in the peace dialogues between the government of Colombia and the National Liberation Army, Senator Maria Jose Pizarro thanked Cuba for its undeniable commitment to achieve peace in her country.
Cuba has always given us times of reconciliation. Its commitment to peace in Colombia has been undeniable. Since the 1990s, it has always been a guarantor, even the venue of dialogues to end the war in our troubled country. Its role in the dialogues and peace agreements with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia People's Army is an example of commitment, seriousness, and generosity with the Colombian people. Also in those times, Cuba supported talks with the National Liberation Army. For honoring its role as host, Cuba was included in the list of countries sponsoring terrorism. The best reparation for this offense and injustice is that this third cycle achieves substantial and definitive progress on the agreed agenda.
On Tuesday, Cuba hosted over 1,000 foreign delegates and attendees for the International Meeting of Solidarity with the Caribbean Nation and Anti-Imperialism. Foreign visitors will be joined by around 200 national delegates at the Convention Palace of the capital to raise their voices against U.S. economic, commercial, and financial blockade and in favor of the elimination of the Caribbean country from Washington's unilateral list of nations that allegedly sponsor terrorism. During the last few days, those who traveled to the island attended the 13th International Scientific Workshop, May Day, which had among its main axes the contemporary debate on historiography, theory, and method for the study of labor and workers, as well as the social movements in the Americas. The Monroe Doctrine, America for all the Americans, was attributed in 1823 to James Monroe, the fifth President of the United States. In Paraguay, former presidential candidates demanded on Monday a manual vote recount after contesting the result of Sunday's elections that gave the victory to the candidate of the ruling Colorado Party, Santiago Peña. Also on Monday, hundreds of demonstrators came out to protest against the alleged fraud outside the Superior Tribunal of Electoral Justice in the Paraguayan capital, Asunción, and other localities. Police repression with tear gas and rubber bullets, as well as cavalry charges, was reported in some points of the city. The mobilizations took place after a call made by the ultra-conservative former presidential candidate Payo Cubas, who denounced electoral fraud by the Colorado Party. Along with Cuba's other opposition candidates such as runner-up Efraín Alegre of the National Concertación and Euclides Acevedo of Political Movement of the New Republic requested the software used for the elections be audited, as well as a hand recount of the votes and the presence of international observers. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, arrived on Tuesday in Madrid on his first state visit to Spain with the aim of strengthening bilateral economic and commercial relations, but also to discuss the process promoted in the Latin American country to achieve what the Colombian president calls total peace. Sources of the Spanish government advanced its support to this project and to the social measures undertaken by the Colombian president. Spain accompanies the peace process in Colombia, a condition reaffirmed by the president of the Spanish government, Pedro Sánchez. Petro arrived accompanied by his wife, Verónica Alcocer, and the Colombian foreign, mines, education, and trade ministers from a cabinet that was reshuffled on Monday. It will not be until Wednesday when Petro will officially start his state visit. Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre said on Tuesday that his government will bring military spending to 2% of gross domestic product (GDP) by 2026. According to the Prime Minister, on a per capita basis, Norway is the country that spends the most on defense in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization after the United States. The Scandinavian country's military budget is just over 1.4% of GDP, and until this decision, the kingdom lacked of a concrete plan to reach the 2.0% target. However, the government believes that in light of the increase in revenues from the sale of hydrocarbons in the context of the situation in Ukraine, this has become especially relevant. On Tuesday, the Russian Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, announced that the KTRV Corporation, which brings together 14 companies in the military sector, will double its production of high-precision missiles as soon as possible. At a meeting with senior military commanders, Shoigu said that such weapons include advanced laser-guided anti-radar, anti-ship, and smart bombs, and other missiles, including hypersonic missiles. The top military chief pointed out that his portfolio almost tripled the acquisition of weapons since the beginning of 2022, and the purchases of the most in-demand ones increased sevenfold. The minister also confirmed that the defense sector companies cover the demand for armaments by the country's armed forces. In this context, the Israeli army fired on the Gaza Strip on Tuesday as a response to the ongoing unrest after the death in Israeli custody of a Palestinian prisoner on hunger strike. The Israeli occupation forces claim to have attacked Gaza with tank fire in response to what they allege were rockets fired from Gaza. The shooting comes hours after the death of 45-year-old prisoner Kader Adnan, nearly 3 months after his arrest in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Nayeh called his death deliberate murder, accusing Israel of killing him, while Israeli National Security Minister far-right Itamar Ben-Gvir said prison officials decided to close the prison cells to avoid unrest. Members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus began on Tuesday to cut crude oil production, a measure that will last until late 2023. According to the official reports, OPEC Plus will cut production by about 1.5 million barrels per day as an additional measure of moderation to the cut applied in October 2022, which aims at maintaining the stability of the oil market. Saudi Arabia voluntarily reduced its crude oil production by 500,000 barrels per day, Iraq by 211,000, the United Arab Emirates by 144,000, Kuwait by 128,000, Algeria by 48,000, and Oman by 40,000. Russia, for its part, informed that it will extend until the end of the year the voluntary reduction of 500,000 barrels of crude oil per day. The crude oil market is going through a period of high volatility and unpredictability due to the current banking crisis in the United States and Europe, as well as global economic uncertainty. In the face of the harsh drought they suffered, young parishioners in Spain held a procession to pray for rain and to save their famous olive fields. Thousands crowded Jaén streets, headed by a depiction of Christ carrying the cross, in a first since 1949, the last time the believers prayed for rain. This region of Spain is well known in the production of olive oil, therefore seasonal rains are paramount to keep the production running. According to local sources, 60% of Spanish agricultural land is currently suffocated by the lack of rainfall, while the country's water reservoirs are at 50% of their capacity. The Spanish government asked the European Commission on Tuesday to activate the crisis reserve to help its farmers hit by the historic drought that threatens harvests. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy a Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Sudan, the National Army and the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group agreed on Tuesday to a 7-day truce starting May 4th. The African Nations Foreign Ministry made the announcement in a phone conversation with South Sudan's President Salva Kiir. The move raises hopes of an end to weeks of bloodshed. The truce was reached by Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his deputy-turned-rival Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, who commands the RSF. Hundreds of people have been killed and thousands wounded in the fighting as airstrikes and artillery exchanges have bound the swath of Greater Khartoum, sparking the exodus of thousands of Sudanese to neighboring countries. The statement from Juba also said the two sides agreed to name their representatives to peace talks to be held at any venue of their choice. On Tuesday, UN officials confirmed that more than 100,000 refugees have crossed from Sudan to neighboring countries to escape the conflict that erupted last month in the country. Olga Sarrado, spokesperson at the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, pointed out that over 100,000 refugees are estimated to be among those who have now crossed to neighboring countries, including Sudanese refugees. While the International Organization for Migration also said that over 334,000 people had been internally displaced within the country since April 15th. The UN also announced that the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs Martin Griffiths is suspected to visit Sudan on Tuesday, seeking to improve humanitarian access through guarantees of safe passage. On the other hand, a World Health Organization official said it has delivered 6 containers of supplies to Port Sudan and has another 30 tons of aid stock waiting in Dubai for delivery. World Food Programme Executive Director Cindy McCain is on a work visit to Somalia, where he already met with Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. McCain's visit is intended to discuss a range of issues such as the development of Somalia's food programs, the support provided by WFP, the development of food programs, and addressing the challenges posed by climate change to food security. It should be emphasized that in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, one starvation death occurs on average every 36 seconds, according to UN statements. On 2023, the number of malnourished pregnant or breastfeeding women in Africa is projected to rise to 154,000 from 64,000 in 2022, also quoted the UN report. The head of the World Food Programme, Cindy McCain, warned during her visit to Somalia that there is still a risk of famine for the Somali population and stressed that people will die from it, especially children.
Yes, there is a risk of famine in Somalia. Last year we were able to keep it at bay because of the efforts of WFP and our partner NGOs and certainly the Somali NGOs that were in here as well. But this year we're not sure we're going to have the same kind of money that we had last year, so that will mean there'll be less rations to less people. That's an important issue here, because unless we can continue to feed the population that we need to feed, people are going to die as a result of this, and especially children.
On Tuesday in Kenya, self-proclaimed Pastor Paul Mackenzie appears in court in Malindi to face terrorism charges in connection with the death of over 100 people in what has been dubbed the Chakahola Forest Massacre. Kenya's majority Christian and deeply religious population has been shocked by the discovery last month of mass graves in a forest near the coastal town of Malindi, and self-proclaimed Pastor Paul Mackenzie is accused of luring his followers to starve to death under the promise they would meet Jesus. So far, 109 people, mostly children, have been confirmed dead. The first autopsies were carried out in Chakahola on Monday on 9 children and 1 woman. Forensics confirmed starvation as the cause of death, although some victims were asphyxiated. Kenyan State Prosecutor Vivian Kamboga emphasized that the investigations are not focused solely on murder and manslaughter charges. Kamboga assured that the court is considering terrorism charges as well.
We wish to update this court that investigations are still taking place. Among the offenses that have been revealed from the investigations are offenses of radicalization under the Prevention of Terrorist Act. Lives have been lost. Over 100 people have died, my lady. Exhumations are going on. Postmortems are going on, my lady. It's unreasonable. My lady, it's unreasonable for council to insist that we should be ready to charge today.
We stay in Kenya. On Tuesday, rival police took to the streets of Nairobi as the opposition vowed to defy a police ban and stage new demonstrations over the cost of living crisis, among other demands. Previous protests called by veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga left at least 3 dead in clashes with police forces. Nairobi Regional Police Commander Adamson Bongay had announced on Sunday that permission to hold demonstrations had been denied due to violence on previous protests. Odinga had announced in April the cessation of demonstrations to allow for bipartisan talks. President William Ruto barely beat Raila Odinga in his 5th presidential election defeat and continues to insist that the poll was fraudulent and that the victory was stolen. Ruto, who took over in September, has branded the opposition action as nonsense. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.